With the oral history program. This is Ray Mofield, and we're visiting today with Elza Ray Smith. Mr. Smith, you did live in Calvert City. I understand you recently married.
Yes, I lived in Calvert City about 57 years, and my wife died last June the 8th, and I did remarry.
Well, let's get started first about your age.
I'm 79 years old.
And were you born in Marshall County?
Born in Marshall County, down at, in the Vons Chapel area, or Possum Trot. Little Cypress, it's all, Little Cypress, of course, is about gone. Vons Chapel is still there, but they've renamed it Possum Trot.
Well, whatever the name, it's a great community.
Yes, it is.
And it's good to see you again. And did you go to school in that area?
I went to school at a little old one-room school, which is Vons Chapel, and Miss Mamie Camel was their teacher for many years down there, and she was a wonderful teacher. She was an old maid, I guess. She was old before she married, and then finally she married Tom Harper. Well, that's a long time after I went to school, though. But anyway, she taught most of the years that I went to school at Vons Chapel. Now, there's one year that the school superintendent, I don't remember now what his name was. He was school superintendent. He taught part of one year down at Vons Chapel. I can't think of his name now. I thought I could when I first started talking. But anyway, I went to school until I guess I was 17 or 18 years old at Vons Chapel. And then, of course, we lived on a farm, and I worked on my daddy's farm. We raised tobacco and hogs and cattle and a lot of hay, and we farmed with teams. I plowed a many a day right out in the field, you know. And,
that tobacco setting was pretty hard work.
At that time we had to set it by hand. We've taken an old tobacco bag and we humped over and set every hill of it by hand.
You laid it off both directions.
That's right. We laid it off in both directions, and we'd go in there with the hoes and make hills. You know, we'd put a little dab of fertilizer in the hill. We'd make a hill on it, and then we'd set that tobacco on those hills.
I remember my dad had a favorite fertilizer, Old Black Joe.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still make that or not.
I don't remember. And, of course, when I was 17, or a little after 17, I had the opportunity of going to Cambria, Illinois, to work for the railroad company.
Was that the Illinois Central?
That was the Illinois Central. That's near Carpendale.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked there for about I was there about 4 years. But during that 4 years' time, I decided I wanted to be a telegraph operator, and I went to Valparaiso, Indiana, to Dodge's Institute of Telegraphy and Railway Accounting and Radio School.
Say, that was quite an accomplishment for those days.
Yes, it was. I said then that's the best move I ever made in my life, and I still say it is. I wasn't very much on penmanship, but when I got there, I'd taken spelling, penmanship, telegraphy, and typewriting, and railroad accounting, and telegraphy.
Then you had a skill that you could sell.
Right. And then when I came out from that school, I came back to, Paducah, or Possum Trot, and I went to work for the Kentucky division of the railroad company as a telegraph operator. I worked from Paducah to Central City and from Hopkinsville to Evansville, Cairo to Paducah, and so I worked about 3.5 years as a telegraph operator, and then it became the 1930.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know what happened, and when the 1930s hit, the Depression come on, and they began to lay people off, and then I got laid off. And I didn't know what in the world I was going to do, and we was building the old Calvert City High School at Calvert City. And I went over and I went to work on that. And I dug ditches, carried brick, made mortar, and I done just a little bit of everything.
Glad to get it.
And glad to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And just as the school was being finished, Mr. Lewis Hall of Calvert City, he was a carpenter contractor, and he was working on the schoolhouse, and he said, would you like to come over and help trim this schoolhouse out? Seemed like you're gifted with your tools, and you can come over and help us trim the schoolhouse out, put the woodwork in it. And I said, I sure would, and we got that trimmed out, and then he says, well, would you like to help me build a house? And I said, yes, I sure would. Well, I started helping him build a house, and so I become very interested in carpenter work. And he had me on top one day skinning around marking some rafters. And I said, Mr. Hall, isn't there some way to do this without having to get up here and scribe these things? He said, yeah, but we haven't got time to do so much figuring. Well, it passed on. I thought, well, there must be another way. And we passed on, and that afternoon he says, if you go by the house, I've got some books you might be interested in. And you can look at them, I'll sell them to you. So I went by, and he had a set of carpenter books. I looked at them and bought them. And I studied those books for 5 long months and couldn't read them. Couldn't tell heads nor tails. But I was so determined, I just kept on. So I found a rafter square at Sears and Roebuck, and the diagram of that square was in that book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it opened it wide open.
Then you could understand.
I began to understand. And then I started to Tillman trade school, and I went there about 4 different terms studying carpentry, and finally got to where I could drive a nail and saw off a board, but I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to know why that I had to saw it off, and what the mark was put on there for, and I just kept on studying, and then I finally went to Charlestown, Indiana, and went to work as a carpenter. Stayed there 9 months.
Was that up around World War II? Or
that was right during, and pretty soon it was over after that.
Mm-hmm. I remember, since you mentioned Charlestown, it seems to me that there was some sort of a shell loading place or something.
It was a powder plant. They made powder there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came home and went to work over at Kentucky Dam. And I worked over there about a little over 4 years. And I taken they give blueprint classes, so I went to the TVA blueprint schools, about 4 or 5 different terms, and I got a certificate from Tillman Trade and also from TVA that I was a carpenter and I could read blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
But I never did present them to anybody. I was kind of scared they'd think too much. They'd expect too much out of me,
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I managed to struggle through, and I hardly, just a short time. It's the only time I ever worked with my tools. When these plants come to Calvert City, I went to work there, and I imagine in about 2 weeks, Huber Construction asked me if I'd be a foreman for him, and of course I asked him if he thought I could, and he said, well, if I didn't think it, I wouldn't ask you. And so I said, all right, if you think I can, I'll try it. And so I was foreman in the area all the time from then on. Of course, now there's times that I worked with my tools, but I'd draw foreman's pay anyway. See,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked for Charles Story, Traylor Brothers, and Leonard Construction, and Johnson, Hip Johnson. I worked for a lot of different contractors. Even worked for C&L Construction, my 2 sons.
Yes.
Yep. And so after all, I guess I had a pretty good career. I enjoyed it, working with people. But if it hadn't been for the men on the job, I don't think I could have made it. and I don't believe anybody else can make it without the men on the job either. I don't care how smart they are. They can mess you up so bad that you just can't stay.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried to be courteous to everybody, and I think it paid off. I still believe in it.
Well, it certainly apparently did. Well, now, tell us something about your first wife, your children.
Well, now we was married when she was 17 years old. I was railroading at that time, and we went to Harrisburg, Illinois, and was married. And we really had a real happy life. She was an awful sweet, good woman, and we had 7 children, and they never did give us a minute's trouble. None of our children. They was all good fellas, good girls, and they still are. And I owned some farms. See, I bought some farms along the way, but I didn't farm too much. But my wife would take those kids out there on the farm, and they would go right along, you know, and she done good with them. And they raised quite a lot of stuff. But
I suppose you grew an awful lot of what you ate.
Oh, yes, yeah. See, at one time I owned 161 acres of land down there at Calvert City. And I was after the boys when they was going to high school to go ahead and farm a little bit. I bought them 3 brand new tractors, and they said, "Well, Daddy, you don't farm." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "Well, you don't farm." I said, "That's right. I don't. I'm out working all the time." And I said, "If that's what you want, if you want to go get you a job, okay. We'll just get rid of the farming equipment and y'all can go to work." So that's what we did, and they every one they went out and got them a job and did very well at it. But while we was farming, it's people had thought I was working the kids pretty hard and all, but we'd be working along, and maybe one of those kids would hum a little bit of a song, and we'd just stop right there. Maybe we'd sing an hour,
Mm-hmm.
just one right after the other.
You loved it, didn't you?
Yes, sirree. And they loved it. They still do. And we was happy at it. And my wife was a musician. She could play anything she picked up. She was a good violinist. She played the violin, also the guitar, the mandolin, and she could play a piano some. So we went to several fiddlers contests. Went over here at Brownsburg, old schoolhouse over there. We went to Sharp, went to Gibbertsville, Calvert City, and she would take home a prize occasionally. Yes, sirree.
Oh, that's great.
And we had a wonderful life. And a lot of times we'd be sitting out in our front yard. Of course, that's the only thing we knew to do. Is she'd get that old violin out, and we'd get the guitar and the mandolin, and she'd start playing. And it wasn't no time till the neighborhood just about all was there. And first thing you know, we was having a real good party.
Yeah.
The kids and the old people and everybody else would come in, join in with us singing and playing music. So we really did enjoy ourselves. And she was a very, very sweet woman.
What
woman.
was her maiden name before she married?
Ferguson.
Ferguson.
Now she came from Scotland and Ireland. Her people did, you know.
Mhm.
That's where her people originated. I have the history of her folks, and some of them was king, some of them was philosophers, and they was all, not every one of them probably, but a lot of them, you know, was very prominent people.
Yes, sir.
And Stickett at Lonnie one time, when he read that, somebody spoke to him. He said, "Now wait a minute," said, you have to approach me different to that. He said, "I'm royalty," and he told him about his mother's people, you know.
Yeah.
Well, it is something.
It certainly is.
Yes, sir.
Certainly, great thing to be proud of. I hear Lonnie on Sunday morning, and apparently his musical group is doing real well.
They're doing fine.
They've got some good recordings. Let's see.
Yeah.
One I noticed they get a lot of requests for. There's a reason for it all.
That's right. That's my favorite. They played that last Sunday morning for me, and in honor of her mother. She really liked that. It's a good song. And someone asked how long the boys had been singing. I don't know, really, ever since they're little bitty.
Mm-hmm.
We was in New Albany, Indiana, and the churches would all have a program once a week to different churches, as a fellowship thing. And they asked us to go, and we, of course, Lucille and Wanda was the oldest daughters. Lucille, Wanda, Hattie Mae, and I would sing quartet. And so Joel and Lonnie and Charles, just barely big enough to sing a little, and we got them up there, and Lonnie sang, Pete, Joel, and it was something, them little old bitty kids up there singing, and everybody, they thought it was all right.
Yeah.
And we had some real good programs up there. So we really tried to enjoy ourselves, and of course when we was living up there in near New Albany, we'd get out in the yard in the evening and start making music, and the people would gang in, even strangers. We didn't even know who they were.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon everybody likes to hear good music. And while I was in Valparaiso, Indiana, there's a group of the kids there that were musicians. One boy, he had infantile paralysis, and he had to go in a wheelchair, and he could strictly play the violin. And we'd get out on the school ground on Saturday afternoon, and we'd start showing off. We wasn't thinking about anybody hearing us, but the first thing here, they'd look around, there'd be several, 50 or 75 people just standing around on the sidewalk listening to us play. But when we'd notice it, kids we'd just goof off and we'd just quit. And they'd try to pay us to play and everything, and we wouldn't do it. We just... But now, there's some boys there could really play. There's some from Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois. There's from all over,
Mm-hmm.
and some good musicians. And we really had a good time.
Now you evidently would have a number of grandchildren.
I've got 19 grandkids, and I believe it's 6 great-grandkids. Yeah. Sure.
So Lonnie's a grandfather then.
Yeah, Lonnie is a grandfather. He has 2 grandkids. And, well, Pete is about to become a grandfather. Well, he is already, yeah. Bobby's got a little girl. Yeah, Pete's a grandfather already. Of course, she's fixing to have a baby, too. And Joel, he is a grandfather. And Donald, the youngest boy, his daughter-in-law is getting pretty far along. He'll be grandfather, too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all growing up, and age is creeping up on us.
Yes. Well, of course, old Father Time keeps marching right along.
That's true.
Now, one of the boys I see around Hardin sometimes.
That's Donald. He's the baby boy. He's a contractor. He's a specialties contractor, and doing well, I think. From what he says, he and his sons, they're running the company, and they're doing well.
Do they still call it C&L?
No, that's West Kentucky Specialties. Donald's company is. Now C&L is Pete and Lonnie. They're at Calvert City. They're general contractors.
Mm-hmm. And they're still operating?
They're still operating. They working in, well, I think they've got work in about every plant in Calvert City. And of course they do outside work. They had a job in Arkansas too that they're doing here. Well, probably they still got one going down there. So they're going along fairly well. And I'm very proud of them. And,
well, generally when I see Lonnie, he's eating a lot of watermelon. He seems to enjoy that every year.
Oh yeah, he talks about the watermelon burst over at Benton, a lot, and that's getting to be a pretty big thing too,
Mm-hmm.
That watermelon burst over there. There's quite a few people going to that now. And I go, I don't think I missed a one since I started going, and it's really a good time. Have a good time. They have singing and people fellowshipping together all over the place, and it's getting to be a pretty big thing.
Well, we have a few more minutes left. Let's ask you about your present wife. Who was she?
Well, she was Esther Moppin. She lived down at Draffenville. She was a widow for 6 years. Said she never did go out with anybody. Had the chance to go with the guy a time or two, but she didn't want to. And I wasn't really looking for someone to get married to, but I called her up and we went out, and it seems like when we first met, we was compatible. She said she felt comfortable with me, and I know I did her. And the more that we were together, why, the closer seemed like we got. And we didn't intend to get married as soon as we did, but I told her, I said, well, there's no use to fool around and wait any longer. I said, I think I know what you are, and you know what I am, and you know that you love me and I love you. And so we decided to just go ahead and get married. So we talked to the Brother Brazier and asked him if he thought it might be too soon, and he said, well, what is too soon? You know, you can't, there's no rule, law.
That's right. Did she have a family?
She has 2 children, a girl and a boy. And
I suppose she was from Marshall County.
no, she's from Tennessee, around Knoxville. But she'd been down here for about 36 years or so. She'd been married a couple of times before. And
well, you have a beautiful home here.
yeah, well, we bought this together when we got married. Why, we said we'd just go out and get us a home of our own. You know, I still have my home at Calvert City. It's for sale, and she has her home at Draffenville. She just sold her farm this past week. She had a farm and she sold it, but she still has her house for sale. But we haven't been homesick. She said she hadn't been homesick to go back to her house, and I know I haven't mine.
Yes, sir.
So we're very happy together. And she's a real nice lady. She's a Christian woman, and we enjoy being with each other. It kind of hurt the children up for a little while after we married, but I think they see through it now, and they're all right. They love her, and she loves them.
Well, that's good. Now, as I said, we're going to have to sign off here in just a minute. I generally ask people we've interviewed if they can think of any, maybe their most embarrassing moment or some kind of a situation that turned out to be amusing or something or other. Does anything like that come through your mind?
Well, yeah, really. When we decided to get married, I felt like maybe it's a lot too soon, and it was kind of embarrassing to me for the children. I knew it was hurting them, and I felt sorry for them, and I prayed about it and wondered if I should go ahead or not. And anyway, we did go ahead. I think the answer came, and so they're all right, we're all right. And Sharon said just this past week it would have been the same thing if we'd have waited till now. They'd have still had to gone through it. So I guess that's right. But my first wife and I can't think of a time that we had any embarrassing moments or all. She never did say that I'm going back home to Mama or nothing like that. We never did have that kind of a experience.
Well, you've had a wonderful life, Mr. Smith, and we appreciate the fact that you chatted with us and given us some of the things that happened to you over your lifetime. I'm amazed that you got away and got so much education in an earlier time. That wasn't quite as common then as it is now.
I just wasn't satisfied with sitting around and doing nothing. Now, I felt like there was something out there, and I went for it. I know my daddy told me, he said, well, son, we can all live at home a lot cheaper than we can scattered out all over the country. I said, Dad, I didn't come home to ask you if I can go to Valparaiso, Indiana. I came home to tell you where I'm going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I had my own money to go on,
Uh-huh.
and I'm awfully proud that I went. And I'm proud that I did when I got my railroading career over with, or they laid me off. It wasn't nothing else for me. That I went into carpentry and studied. I didn't want to just cut a board off and drive a nail. I wanted to know why you had to cut it off and what all the angles and different things were.
Yeah.
And it paid off. And I still try to learn. I still like to try to learn things.
Well, that's the spirit.
That's
Just
right.
keep learning as long as you live.
I like a lot of knowing very much, but I still like to try to learn.
Well, that's great. This is Ray Mofield. We've been visiting in the home of Elza Ray Smith. I guess, what neighborhood would we
This
call
is
it?
Bryansburg.
Bryansburg. Good. We'll call this the heart of downtown Bryansburg, and we return you now to our studio.